director Doug as he spans the globe by sea, by land, and air to bring you the best of Figures in Action! Director Doug here, and welcome to another exciting performance of Figures in Action, brought to you by cinemacircus.net. And we have an outstanding show for you, a very unique one that's of historical magnificence, if you will. I have with me Mr.
Christopher Crouch.
What do you think as you look back on it? What brought this the power into it, do you think? The creativity?
Yes, well, creativity is a good word. I mean, the concept came from Sidney Newman, who was actually Canadian, but he was at the BBC in those days, and he was the head of BBC drama, and he sort of had this sort of concept. He brought in other people to sort of make it happen, if you will, flesh the idea out. And of course, the very famous first producer who he had on the series, Verity Lambert, who is credited with so much of what Doctor Who became. She wasn't with it for that long, when you think that Doctor Who's been around all these years and spanned for centuries, quite literally now. But Verity certainly put her stamp on it. Sidney, though, being, well, I mean, she was behind the scenes, but I mean, she became a personality in her own right through that connection. Sidney, I think, possibly, you can read about that, but he was very much the BBC executive in the background. But not necessarily many heads of drama would actually come up with the format for what was to become one of the most successful programmes the BBC's ever made. Now, there are other things. Science fiction has been with us for a very long time, but TV was still a comparatively new medium in those days. I mean, it had been around since the late 30s, but weren't very many people who saw it. The thing that kind of put it on the map in Britain was the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, and just about anybody who didn't have a television that went out and bought one, or made sure they were visiting with somebody who already owned one. That kind of transformed television as a must-have. So another 20 years on, another 10 years on, people are watching certainly family television, and that's where it was at that most pretty much peak viewing time. It was hoped that they would have been watching the sport on BBC television on a Saturday afternoon, and then they'd stay on that and be on it for the early evening news, which was the other big thing. But it got a very big audience from the start because it was science fiction. It had actors who were known in it. They weren't trying to create a new character with a new actor. I mentioned earlier Hartnell, who was well known from film roles, Trelton from film roles, and quite a lot of TV work. Pertwee, the same. And then Tom, who not long beforehand had been Rasputin on the big screen, a very major British movie. So, they were, perhaps one wouldn't have called them all leading men of the British cinema or television, but they were very well-known actors. And so were a number of the companions who had been in a number of different things beforehand on television.
So they were recognized, and they also had their expertise, and they were just very, very good at what they did, their craft.
They were people who were good at their job, yes, and they had a recognition factor which would have drawn fans, I'm sure. But there were other factors. One can ask this question, could the Doctor's basic adventures kept the series going, certainly for as long as it did, if there weren't some other iconic figures who turned up. And clearly the most well-known of those are the Daleks.
The Daleks.
Has to be the Daleks, doesn't
Really?
it? So much so that playing the Doctor has a pedigree of its own, and I believe this, which again is going to be an iconic figure, the new Doctor as a Time Lady, been seen briefly, and now she'll continue in the series, certainly has made the look of the Doctor, changed it again, updated, which is important to keep things fresh, if you will. So I think the fact that people have changed has kept the series fresh, and by bringing in particularly the Daleks, who would never have succeeded as a legitimate threat from outer space. They can't climb stairs, of course, is the first thing that everybody jokes about Daleks. And they've only got one eye, and it sticks out here, and of course the first thing you'd do was take the eye away, and, you know, boom, got a nasty little weapon down there, and a plunger to biff you with, but look at them and think, oh, I'm a manufacturer of toys, I could make that very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there wasn't in those days a department doing this licensing, and the BBC was using an agent, basically, to represent them and do the deals, take his cut, and then the BBC would take theirs, and whoever else was involved. And in this case it was Terry Nation, who's become a well-known name in British science fiction. He was the script writer of one, I think it was the second story, and the second story called for a monster. So he said, well, what I envisage is another planet where there's two sort of human races, but they're always fighting each other, and one has gained the upper hand by they've got this inventor called Davros, who's one of their top people, who's made a kind of shell for them to be in, and over a number of years they've changed from being humans to, it's always said they look like a giant squid or something like that, but to protect them and make them much stronger than their enemies, you know, and now we just have this thing that looks like a robot going around. The kids all claimed that they hid behind the sofa and just peeked out whenever a Dalek came on, but everybody seemed to like them. And almost immediately, our friend Walter Tuckwell licensed 2 feature films, which don't sync very well with the history of Doctor Who, but it was Doctor Who and the Daleks, and Daleks Invasion Earth. And Peter Cushing actually paid the Doctor there, but he is one of the BBC's Doctors. And the other joke is that he was called Doctor Who, which the BBC always bent over backwards to make sure that the series was known as that, and if anybody wants to talk off camera about Doctor Who, that's fine, but he is the Doctor. Because in the first episode, the TARDIS materialises, and there's a couple of school teachers, I think it's a school playground or something like that, and they're a bit sort of taken aback by this, and so on, but, you know, what's happening here? Door opens, and out steps William Hartnell, and the first companion, who was Susan Foreman, playing his granddaughter as a character. And so they say, who are you? And he said, I am the Doctor. And one of the teachers said, yeah, but Doctor Who? He said, no, just the Doctor.
Oh.
And that's how he is. And if you end up, 1 or 2 stories ended up in Gallifrey, where other Time Lords knew him, so they of course all refer to him as the Doctor. And the Daleks would soon get to know him, even if he was meeting the Daleks 10 years before he met them the last time, or perhaps even 1,000 years before he met them. Where I say, "You are the Doctor." He became instantly well known and expected to be instantly well known. But the first thing that really, I think, made Walter Duckwell a very rich man was licensing on behalf of the BBC Doctor Who, and in particular the Daleks. I mean, it might be an apocryphal story, but Verity Lambert has always told this story. She was out for lunch one day with some fellow BBC people and talking, and Tuckwell apparently was at the next table, and I don't suppose she knew him from Adam, and he might not have recognised her at all, but she was obviously talking about Doctor Who, and he realised who she was. So he got up from his seat at his table, rather like Colleen did with Tom at my earlier tale, and he comes over and he says, "Miss Lambert, I believe. Yes, yes. Dear lady, you have made me a very rich man. Thank you so much."